The Consumer Price Index, Eamon, in December was 10.5% higher than in December 2021. That's down from 10.7% in November. This is a reduction in inflation, but inflation is still in double digits. Just in October, the number was 11.1. That was a 41-year high. So this is an easing in the cost of living crisis. Inflation is falling, but I would say that this is pretty disappointing. The Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, said just earlier this week he was looking to a rapid fall in inflation given that energy prices are falling across the world. The price of natural gas yesterday on international markets in Europe was 55 euros per megawatt hour. In December, it was 150 euros per megawatt hour. Energy prices are falling, but inflation is proving quite sticky. This will not help the government when it comes to trying to negotiate wage demands.
Why is that then? Because I know he was saying, look, this rapid fall is going to be great for inflation, but there's some problem with worker shortages really being a major factor in all of this.
Yeah, but there is obviously a shortage of workers. We heard yesterday, Isabel, that pay across the UK went up by 6.4% during the last few months of 2022 compared to the same period in the previous year. That's the highest increase in nominal pay since 2001. That's pushing up firms' costs, of course. They pass those costs on. The ONS has just released a statement saying prices at the pump did fall noticeably in December, talking, of course, about petrol. Not so much diesel, as van drivers will know, but certainly petrol, with the cost of clothing also slightly dropping back. However, said the ONS, this was offset by increases for coach and airfares, as well as overnight hotel accommodation. Food costs, this is the big one, continue to spike, with prices also rising in restaurants, cafes and shops.
We've got a statement from the Chancellor just been released in relation to the story. He says high inflation is a nightmare for family budgets. It destroys business investment. It leads to strike action. So however tough, we need to stick to our plan to bring it down. While any fall in inflation is welcome, we have a plan to go further and halve inflation this year, reduce debt and grow the economy. But it is vital that we take the difficult decisions needed and to see the plan through. And he points out how they're helping families in the meantime with an average of £3,500.
Well, that's bad news, because what he's saying there is there are no pay settlements, really, is what he's saying.
What he's trying to do is to appeal over the head of the trade unions to the broader public to say, look, if we give 10% plus pay rises across the public sector, about a fifth of us work in the public sector, that will have knock-on effects to the private sector. That will push up inflation and everyone will suffer. The thing about inflation is it turns good numbers into bad numbers when they're actually lived by ordinary people. Take that retail sales number yesterday, 6.4% up, hooray! The tills are ringing, the economy's booming, but actually that was a big fall in real retail sales because of inflation. It was the biggest fall since 2009. And this is the problem. Inflation is an insidious tax on everybody. It hits the poorest hardest because we know that it's been food price inflation and also, until very recently, energy price inflation, which has hit the most vulnerable households because they disproportionately spend on those things.
Liam, am I being unduly cruel here, but Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, why hasn't he got his finger on the pulse more accurately? He's got access to all these figures, all these trends, and he's far from impressive, isn't he, in his predictions?
Well, I said repeatedly this time last year, inflation is going to be a major, major problem. When I launched my On the Money show in September 2021, the first edition of that was Big Inflation is Back, and here's why, and I was pilloried for that. The Governor of the Bank of England was behind the curve for a long time. He kept saying inflation would be transitory, where you could see in global supply chains, post-lockdown, there were going to be problems. And it may be now that he's overcompensating because he was slow to identify that inflation was coming. Yeah. He now doesn't want to be slow to identify that inflation is falling.
So, in short, before we bring Dan in here, inflation is heading in the right direction, but not as quickly as anybody would like. We've now got the Chancellor coming out and saying, hey, you can forget getting the pay increases that you're looking for, which really is going to lead to a winter of discontent, and February the 1st being this terrible day of strike action.
Well, you know what? I was listening to the conversation earlier between David Mellor and Scarlett Maguire. There is a lot of strikes going on. If you look at the number of strike days lost in November, that figure came out yesterday with the pay statistics I mentioned. And you take those November numbers and you annualise them, times it by 12, it amounts to 5.6 million strike days lost, right? If that trend continued for the next 12 months. During that winter of discontent, Eamon, in 1979, which we remember as lads, it was 29.5 million strike days lost. So, yes, there is a lot of industrial action, but the 70s was a different world.
Yeah.
The last thing I'd say for now is that in early February, on the 2nd, we have the next decision from the Bank of England, the Monetary Policy Committee. This does nothing to suggest, this inflation number, that we're not going to see another quite substantial increase in interest rates, probably half a percentage point rather than the quarter percentage point which some people were hoping for.